Tell him that.
因为他今天不在。
I am the congregational care minister here at Brentwood.
他是教会的一个雇员。
But tonight we'll be talking about family.
那我们应该来讲关于家庭。
My wife Denise and I have been married for 45 years.
我们结婚45年。
We have 4 grown adult children.
4个孩子已经长大成人。
3 grandchildren.
3个孙子孙女。
And 1 additional grandchild on the way.
有一个还没有出生。
So thank you. I want to talk a little bit about healthy families.
想讲一下健康的家庭。
We know that coming out of the pandemic, there were a lot of families that were in stress. When we were quarantined for several weeks, when we had to move families back to the home and bring offices and schools in the home, when we lost our usual support system like church, and when our normal rhythm of life and work and play was interrupted, it revealed a lot of family dysfunction and stress. So as we think about getting back to normal, let me suggest that we don't go back to normal, we go to healthy. What are some things that we can do as families that would be healthier than what we were doing before?
我们现在呢，可以成为一个更健康的家庭，跟之前相比。
Leah Waters is a professor of psychology at the University of Melbourne, Australia.
一个澳大利亚的心理学教授。
She's written a book entitled The Strength Switch.
他写了一本书，叫做力量转换。
And in that book, she says families are by far the most powerful, positive psychology delivery system of all.
他说呢，在这个书里，他说这个家庭呢是目前为止最强大的一个心理健康的一个传递系统。
In other words, it's in our families
换句话说呢，在我们家庭当中，
that we have the greatest opportunity to influence health.
我们有很多的机会来去对我们的心理健康去影响，对健康去造成影响。
Mental health,
身体健康，
spiritual health,
一个灵命的健康，
and relationship health.
关系的健康。
I want to show you 4 resources that I'm going to use for our presentation tonight.
给你们看一下4个还有使用到的资料。
These are the 4 books that I would recommend if you want to go and read further.
这本书呢，建议大家去。
On the far left will be The Secrets of Happy Families. This is the book that looks at family life.
这是关于家庭的一些生活。
The next book, The Strength Switch,
第二个是力量转换。
it looks at strength-based parenting.
就是告诉我们父母怎么样去关注孩子的形象。
How to Have a New Teenager by Friday. Kevin Leland is a Christian psychologist.
另外一个呢也是心理写了一本书。
This book talks specifically about the challenges of raising teenagers.
这个呢主要是讲关于我们怎么样在长大这个青少年的问题和青少年抚养的问题。
And then the last book, 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work.
最后一个呢是关于这个婚姻的，有7个可以我们的婚姻更美好。
John Gottman is a leading researcher in marriage today.
这个研究人员呢，他主要是研究这个健康关于这个婚姻的。
And this book looks at 7 things that marriages can do to improve health.
这里面呢有7个经验，可以改善我们的婚姻。
So here's what I want to do.
大家我要做这件事情。
Tonight, let's think about a reset for families.
今天呢，让我们重启我们家庭。
4 things we can do to make families healthy.
4条经验呢，我们可以让我们的家庭更健康。
Okay, number 1, first thing.
第一条，
Let me get the next slide. Healthy families have meals together.
一个健康的家庭呢一起用餐。
In his book, The Secrets of Happy Families, Bruce Thieler says,
幸福家庭的秘密这本书中有说到，
a recent wave of research
最近那个研究表明，
shows that children who eat dinner with their families
小孩和家里人一起用餐的小孩，
are less likely to drink,
有可能就是比较不可能去喝酒、酗酒、
smoke,
抽烟、
do drugs,
吸毒、
get pregnant,
怀孕、
commit suicide,
自杀
and develop eating disorders.
饮食失常。
Additional research found that children who enjoyed family meals
还有一些研究表明呢，孩子如果喜欢跟家人一起用餐的话，
have larger vocabularies,
他的词汇量也比较大，
better manners,
他的举止行为也更好一些，
healthier diets,
他的那个饮食呢有个好的健康饮食习惯，
and higher self-esteem.
自尊心也会很强。
The amount of time children spent eating meals at home
他和家人一起用餐的时间呢，
was the single biggest predictor of better academic achievement
可以预测这个孩子在学校的表现，
and fewer behavioral problems.
还有比较少的一个行为上的问题，这一个预测他的行为问题。
Mealtime was more influential
用餐的时间更有影响力。
than time spent in school,
用餐的时间你在学校花的时间，
studying,
学习的时间，
attending religious services,
去教会的时间
and playing sports.
和这个体育运动的时间更有影响力。
That's all research-based.
这些呢都是研究表明出来的。
Now, I know all of you would love that,
我知道你们很多都很喜欢做这些事情，
but our schedules just don't allow it.
但是呢你们都很忙，
Here's what I'm going to recommend.
我推荐大家呢，
It's got to become a priority for families.
把我们家庭这些事项的先优先权先排一下。
So let me tell you the reasons why.
让我给你讲一下这个原因。
Research indicates it's not just about having the meal together that's important.
研究表明，不仅仅是吃饭这件事情重要，
It's about a family cohesion that develops that meal together.
在我们吃饭的时候呢，我们一起就是碰到一个家庭的凝聚力。
It is family meal times where children learn about their family history,
在一起用餐的时候呢，孩子了解我们家庭的历史，
family successes,
我们家庭的成功，
family failures,
家庭的失败，
family values and beliefs.
我们家庭的价值和我们的信仰。
Research shows that the more a child knows about his or her family,
研究表明呢，孩子知道他们的家庭越多，
the higher their self-esteem and confidence.
他们越自尊、越自强、自信。
Marshall Duke is professor of psychology at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia.
亚特兰大的一个心理学教授，
He says that family meals help children develop an intergenerational self.
他说呢，这个用餐的时间呢，有一种跨越这个辈分的一个自我，小孩发展一个跨越辈分的自我。
They know they belong to something bigger than themselves.
他知道呢，他是属于比他自己还大的一个东西。
They understand that they're not the only ones who struggled,
他们知道他们不仅他们自己挣扎，别人也在挣扎。
but they also learn that family has succeeded.
他们也知道呢，家庭有成功的。
I think it's significant that both the Jewish faith and the Christian faith
很有意思的是，犹太人的信仰，
use a meal to teach the religion.
犹太人的信仰和基督教的信仰呢，都是用吃饭的这件事情来教育大家关于这个信仰的传统。
There's the Passover meal in Jewish faith
逾越节是犹太人的一个传统，
and the Lord's Supper for the Christian faith.
圣餐呢是我们基督徒的一个传统。
When Denise and I still had children living at home,
我和我的太太，当我们孩子还在家里没有离开家的时候，
we always made it a priority as much as we could to eat together as a family.
我们总是尝试在一起吃饭。
Denise would set the table.
他太太呢总是把桌子摆很漂亮，
She would use candles on the table.
还要用蜡烛，
I always insisted turn the lights on,
把灯关了，
but she wanted candles.
他要用蜡烛，
And the family would talk.
那一家人在一起聊天。
Recently, our youngest, Charlotte,
最近呢，我最小的女儿
was talking to some of her friends.
跟她的一个朋友聊天，
Charlotte is now 24 years old,
他的女儿现在是24岁，
and she was talking to her friend about the Enneagram and the 5 love languages.
他跟他朋友聊这个5种爱的语言，还有这种9种性格类型的这件事情。
And her friend said, "How do you know this stuff?"
他会问他你怎么知道这些东西的？
And she says, "This is what we talk about at the dinner table at my family."
他说我们家里一起用餐的时候，这是我们聊天的话题。
So children are learning even when you're not trying to teach around the dinner table.
你这个小孩就是在不知不觉中在学到这些东西，即使你没有刻意去教他。
Marshall Duke again developed what's known as the "Do You Know" scale. Let me get the next slide.
这有一个人呢，他发明了一个，就是你知道吗？这个量表。
The "Do You Know" scale has 20 questions.
这个量表上呢有20个问题。
These are just 5 of the 20 questions.
这里呢我列出了5个问题。
These are questions that we ask our children and we teach them.
这些问题呢我问我的孩子，并且教他。
You know where your grandparents grew up.
你知道你的祖父母是从什么地方长大的？
You know where your mom and dad went to high school.
你知道你的父母去哪里上的高中？
Do you know where your parents met?
你知道你的父母是在哪里相识的？
Do you know of any illness or something really terrible that happened in your family?
你知道你家里有什么病史或者有什么悲剧发生？
Do you know what went on when you were being born?
你知道你在出生的时候发生了什么事吗？
20 questions just like these
20个问题，类似
about family.
关于家庭的20个问题。
Here's what research shows.
研究表明，
This "Do You Know" scale
这个你知道吗？这个量表
turned out to be the best single predictor
是唯一一个特别好的
of a child's emotional health and happiness.
一个指标，能够预测出来孩子这个心理健康。
When children know who they are,
我孩子们知道他是从哪里来，他是谁，
they do better.
他们会有更好的表现。
Now, I recognize that having meals together as a family is not an easy thing to do.
我知道大家每天一起用餐这件事情不那么容易，
It doesn't have to be every night.
但是呢，不需要每一天晚上，
It doesn't have to even be the evening meal.
也不见得非得是晚餐，
It does need to be regular,
但是你必须有一个规律的时间，
and it needs to include conversation.
要有一个交谈，桌上的交谈。
Point is that all of us need time together as a family to talk.
最主要呢是家庭在一起有时间一起去谈话。
So here's your assignment. Next slide, please.
就是给大家交一个作业，
You didn't think I was not going to give you assignments, did you?
没想到会给你作业吧？
I want you to set aside at least one time next week
下一周选一个时间，
for your family to have a meal together.
你们一家人一起用餐。
All right. Number 2, second thing I want to recommend to you is that healthy families have healthy conversations.
第二个呢，我推荐大家就是说，我们作为一个健康的家庭呢，我们一起有健康的谈话。
The goal is not just to talk together,
目标呢不仅仅是谈话，
it is to talk together in healthy ways.
以健康的方式来交谈。
Let me give you a story.
待会儿给你讲个故事。
This is from Kevin Leeman's book, How to Have a New Teenager by Friday.
这是从一本书引用出来的。
Imagine your 16-year-old is sitting down to dinner one night,
想象一下你16岁的孩子，
and he says, "When I'm 21, I'm going to drive a Corvette."
16岁孩子就餐桌上说等到我21岁的时候呢，我要开 Corvette。
What would most dads in their feeding frenzy say?
就是这个时候爸爸正在忙着大吃特吃，就这个时候他会怎么说呢？
Well, then you'd better get your tail going in school.
你要好好学习，
You're going to need good grades to get a good, decent job before that Corvette.
你要好好学习，找到一个好工作才能买得起这个车。
What might mom say?
妈妈会说什么呢？
Oh, excuse me, honey, what's a Corvette?
对不起，什么是 Corvette？
An aunt of mine had something called a Corvair,
我有个阿姨好像有个什么东西叫 Corvair，
or was that my grandmother?
还是我的奶奶，
Is it any wonder that boy sits there the rest of dinner
所以就不奇怪接下来的这个用餐的时间，这个男孩子
with arms crossed
把肩膀放在胸前，
and gives the remaining conversation an occasional grunt?
这就是偶尔应付一句，
He's thinking, whatever.
他在想，随便吧。
Lehman adds, most of the hormone group I've talked to
这个研究人员说呢，这个就是大部分的一些青年人，他交谈过的青年人呢，
feel that their parents spend 99% of their time talking at them.
他们就说呢，99%的这个时间，他们的父母是对他们说话，而不是和他们说话，
rather than talking to them.
就是一直在教育他们。
Parents spend 1% of their time listening to what the children have to say.
父母只花了1%的时间来听这个孩子他们要说的话。
Let me go to the next slide. John Gottman, again, the leading researcher in marriage, lists 4 things that will destroy communication in families.
这个专家呢，他列出了一个4个方面，他可能会毁坏你的婚姻，毁坏你的彼此的这个交流。
He calls these the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
这个是4个提示，编辑了。
When these come into the conversation,
这些东西呢，在你在谈话的时候，如果有这些在你的谈话当中，
they kill relationship.
对你的关系是有损害的。
First one, criticism.
第一个就是批评。
There's a difference between a complaint and criticism.
抱怨呢跟批评呢还有点不一样。
A complaint addresses something very specific that needs to be addressed.
抱怨呢可能就是有特定的一件事情。
Criticism attacks the person's character.
批评呢，它有点就是在人格上的攻击。
Gottman says, turn a complaint into a criticism.
所以说呢，如果把这个抱怨呢变成指责，
Just add the line, what's the matter with you?
不要说一句话，你怎么回事？
Contempt. It's a sarcasm.
轻蔑或者讽刺，
Rolling of the eyes.
翻白眼儿，
Sneering.
冷笑，
Mockery.
嘲笑。
Sometimes it can be hidden in humor.
他们是觉得你在开玩笑，但是实际上在里面藏着这些情绪在里面。
Number 3 is defensiveness.
第3个就是自我辩护。
When we defend ourselves,
当我们为自己辩解的时候，
conversation stops.
就没有这个交谈了。
He says defensiveness is really a way of blaming our partner.
其实你在自我辩解的时候，实际上你就是在你在责备你的配偶。
You're saying, in effect, the problem isn't me, it's you.
实际上你在说这个问题不是我，是你有问题。
And then finally, stonewalling.
这个是呢逃避，
Stonewalling is simply a retreat from the conversation.
就从这个谈话当中逃避了，
It's blocking the other person,
你就阻挡了另外一个人，不想跟另外一个人交流，
and it blocks intimacy.
也阻挡了这个亲密关系。
I want you to look at your own communication style.
你看一下你自己的交流方式，
If you see any of these creeping in,
如果有这些问题的话，
it needs repair.
我们需要一些更正。
Let me give you some simple lessons on communication. Next slide, please.
我给你一个经验，可以有效的去沟通。
In families, learn to listen more than you talk.
多听少说，
Learn to ask questions rather than giving advice.
学习去问问题，而不是给意见。
Never use the word why.
永远不要用为什么这个词儿，
Stop with the shoulds, the must, and oughts,
也不要说你应该、你必须这些词汇也不要用了。
and say how much I love you often.
跟彼此说我有多爱你。
My wife Denise and I have coffee every morning.
我跟我媳妇2个人呢，经常性的每天早上喝咖啡。
We've learned early in our marriage with 4 children.
在我们最开始结婚的时候，
If we didn't have some time set aside just for 2 of us,
如果没有我们2个单独的时间，
our relationship was going to suffer.
我们的关系就会变糟糕。
So we learned that coffee was the best time for us to talk.
我们觉得喝咖啡的时候是最好的时间在一起交谈。
We have coffee every single day.
我们天天一起喝咖啡，
Sometimes it's 10 minutes.
有时候10分钟，
Sometimes it may be a little longer.
有时候长一点时间。
When it's longer, we call that lingering coffee.
我那是长的时候，我们就把它叫挥不去的咖啡。
There are 2 things that we do during coffee.
我们喝咖啡的时候呢，做2件事情。
We go over each other's schedule
我们看一下我们时间表，
and we ask, what do you need from me today?
我们会问对方有什么需要帮助的，
It's not a hard thing to do,
不难。
but it's simply having some time to communicate in a way that the other feels felt.
但是呢，是一个很有效的一个交流方式，交流时间。
So here's your second assignment. Next slide, please.
第二个作业，
I want you to set aside a specific time this next week.
下一周呢，我让你选个时间，
Now, let's say it's Tuesday night at 7 o'clock.
星期二晚上7点。
What I want you to do is talk about 3 good things you did together as a family this week.
然后你们家庭呢一起谈你们在一起做的3件好事。
The word good is key.
这个好这个词儿很关键，
Don't just talk about things you did, talk about 3 good things you did.
不要就是不要就是说一般的事情好的事情，要说好事情3件好事情。
A lot of research has been done around this little exercise.
很多研究表明在这件事情上有很多研究，
It improves family communication,
会改善家庭这个交流，
family closeness,
家庭关系更和睦更亲切，
and family happiness.
家庭呢更幸福，
Simple thing to do.
很简单。
All right, number 3,
第3条，
healthy families give affirmation.
健康家庭呢，我们给彼此肯定。
Kevin Lehman again says,
这个研究人员说，
you wouldn't believe the number of times
你可能不会相信，
adults have told me that they never heard any encouragement in their home.
我的很多成年人说从来没有听到鼓励，从家庭人也能听到鼓励，
They were never told that they were loved
从来没有人说他是被爱的，
or how special they were.
他们很特别，从来没有人说他特别。
Families need to be the place where we hear affirmation.
家庭呢，其实实际上是应该我们得到肯定的地方。
We all have a negativity bias.
我们都有一些消极偏见。
The negativity bias simply means that you're able to see the negative first.
你总是看见消极的，先看到消极的。
So, a couple examples. You make a good presentation at work.
给你举个例子，你在公司上班的时候给一个讲课，
Well done.
讲特别好，
You made one misspeak.
就一点点错误，
All you can think about is the one misspoken word rather than the whole good presentation.
但是你只记住了这个错误，没有记到你这个整个的讲座你做得多好。
Child brings home all A's on the report card.
你孩子回到家全 A，
One B.
只有一个 B，
What do we talk about?
你会说什么呢？
How are we going to fix that one B?
你就讲了怎么样，下次不要考 B。
The scripture is clear.
圣经上说，
The Apostle Paul writing to the church at Ephesus,
保罗说的话，
let no evil come out of your mouths,
不要说恶毒的话，
but only what is useful for building up,
说见到人的话，
as there is need,
当需要的时候就要说见到人的话，
so that your words may give grace to those who hear.
听到的人有益处。
How true that is for our homes.
所以真是这样的，对我们家庭来说真的是这样的。
Science shows that in toddlers through adults,
科学表明呢，从小孩2、3岁一直到成年人，
praise is related to task achievement,
夸奖呢和这个成就，
task enjoyment,
去享受生活，
and task motivation.
积极主动的积极主动的去完成事情。
John Gottman says there's a 5-to-1 ratio.
这个研究人员说呢，有一个5:1的这个比率。
In healthy conversation, there needs to be 5 positive comments for every 1 negative comment.
在一个健康的一个谈话当中呢，有5个积极的一个负面的。
2 types of communication. Next slide, please.
有2类的交流方式，
Deficit focused communication
一个是关注强项，
focuses on the faults, the shortcomings of the individual.
一个是关注于弱项，主要是关注缺点和不足；
Strength focused communication
一个是关注强项，
focuses on successes and positive qualities.
关注的都是积极的和成功。
Let me give a personal story from Leo Waters.
这个人给了一个他自己的故事。
My son is now 13, and for many years he struggled academically.
那这个孩子呢13岁，学习一直都不是特别好，
I was continually called to the school for meetings,
经常性被学校叫去了，
meetings with psychologists,
和心理学专家、
teachers,
老师，
speech pathologists,
这个语言的病理学的老师专家，
and occasional therapists for fixing him.
还有一些这些专家呢，老是想把他的孩子进行一个修复。
It was an awful time.
很糟糕的一段时间之
And
后，
I felt like a failure as a parent.
这个人觉得自己很失败。
Upon reflection, I believe one failure I did succumb to
最后呢，他觉得他有一点呢失败的，有一点很失败呢，
was focusing too much on what was wrong with
他太关注于这个小孩的一些弱点上了，
and not nearly enough on his many accomplishments.
这个孩子的这个成就上他反而没有那么关注。
I remember the moment when I became aware of this.
他就记住，他想知道，他知道他当时就是说意识到这个问题的那个时刻。
I was with a friend
他当时和他的朋友在一起，
talking about the range of specialists I'd been to see
他跟朋友说他看了很多个专家，
and all their thoughts about my son's weaknesses.
还有这孩子所有的一些弱点。
When I finally paused for a breath,
他中间呢停一下，
I noticed a tear
他
coming
的
down my friend's face.
他的朋友呢就哭了，
Whatever could it be?
他就想还是这么哭呢？
She reminded me what a thoughtful,
他就提醒我，
gentle,
他的孩子是一个很温柔、
generous,
很大方、
kind,
很善良、
and funny child my son was.
很幽默的一个孩子。
She told me how sad she felt because not once did I acknowledge any of this.
他对朋友感到很难过，因为他没有一次来肯定他这个孩子的优点。
It was a turning point for me.
这是一个转折点。
I knew to listen more intuitively to the truth.
从今天以后呢，他就是更关注于这个事实，
That focusing on his abundant strengths was the path to growth.
关注于他的这个强项上对他的成长有帮助的事情。
My son is never going to win academic awards,
他的儿子呢，不可能有学业上有多大的成就。
but my shift to a strength focus
但是呢，我现在更关注于他的这个强项上。
and moving my son to a school that similarly focused on his strengths
把孩子呢转到另外一个学校，这个学校跟我有一样的理念，
rather than focusing on his deficits
不是关注于他的这个弱点上，
improved his progress.
就改善了这个孩子的进步。
I'm thankful too that the school recognizes his humanity.
我也很感恩这个学校呢，就是对他这个人性上的认可。
He was recognized for kindness on the school excursion.
他被认可在学校这个远足的时候呢，他也做了一件善事。
Because he volunteered to give his seat to an elderly gentleman.
他积极主动的把他座位让给了一位老人。
He's now performing at an appropriate academic standard,
现在学校的成绩也是达标的，
which is great to see.
是很好的一件事情。
Affirmation,
肯定
recognizing strengths,
肯定你的强项，
saying positive things.
说积极的话，
It ought to be in our family.
我们一定要在家庭中做这些事情。
So next assignment,
下一个作业，
find a time in which every member of your family is encouraged to list their strengths and share those with the family.
找一个时间呢，把你的家庭的人员呢都坐在一起，把别人的强的项、优点都列出来，和别人分享。
Now here may be the challenge.
有点挑战。
It may be hard for some of your family members to know their strengths.
有一些家庭成员可能不知道自己的就是强项是什么。
We may have to pull that out
你可能需要帮助他，让他找到他的强项，
and then remind them of it.
提醒他们，经常提醒他们。
All right, last thing we're going to share tonight.
最后一条，
Final thing. Healthy families have manageable schedules.
健康的家庭有一个能够控制的时间表。
Here's one of the places if we're going to reset family life for healthy.
我们重启我们的家庭，让我们走向一个健康的家庭。
Here's where we have to start.
我们要从这里开始。
The reason that we don't have time for meals together,
我们不能在一起用餐的原因呢？
one of the reasons that we don't have healthy conversations,
我们没有健康的对话的原因呢？
one of the reasons we allow negativity to creep in
我们这个负面情绪这个蔓延呢？
is because we're way overscheduled.
因为我们有太多的事情要做了。
Kevin Lehman says,
这个研究人员说，
anyone who's ever read a single Lehman book
如果你要读过我的书，
knows where I stand on this.
你就知道我怎么看这件事情。
Activities are not good for our kids.
太多活动对孩子没有好处，
Every kid needs some kind of downtime
所有的孩子都需要自己的时间，
where he or she can dream,
可以做梦，
create,
可以创造，
and just be.
就是做他们自己。
Research shows that all of us need good goofing off time.
那研究表明呢，我们每个人都需要一些时间来放松。
Here's the reason why.
这就是为什么呢？
We now know that there is a time lapse between event and registering in the brain.
这一个事情和你的脑神经的强项上有一个关联。
That's called event-related potential.
事件关联的一个潜能。
Because of that gap,
因为这个空隙，
if we try to put too much in our brains at once,
我们如果给我们的脑子太多的信息的话，
we develop what's called cerebral congestion.
That's the word I don't know.
Your brain gets cluttered.
OK.
脑阻塞，脑充血阻塞。
There's a doctor. 大脑充血了。Doctor, he says 大脑充血的 is that word.
Now, think about it this way. A computer sometimes gets jammed up.
计算机呢，有的时候就太多东西了。
You have to shut it down.
你要重启。
Your brain is exactly the same way.
你的其实大脑是一样的。
Now, you may not shut your brain down.
你可能不把你的脑子就是给休
Your
息一下。
brain will shut itself down.
你的大脑会自己。
We call that dissociation.
那有一些关联。
Yeah. Now, here's what we recommend.
我推荐你们。
To perform to your maximum ability.
就是说尽最大的能力。
Take a break once in a while.
要休息一下，就偶尔休息一下。
And move on.
就是先放松。
15 minutes every hour away from focus activity.
每15分钟放松一下。
Frees the brain to consolidate learning.
你的大脑呢可能更有效率。
I'll give an example of that.
给举个例子。
Have you ever been working on a problem and you just got stuck?
有的时候呢，你可能就是在做一件事情，你就没有进展。
Couldn't think about another thing, didn't know what to do.
你不知道怎么办。
You walked away.
你离开从你的桌子离开。
Maybe you went to bed that night.
可能你是睡觉的。
Woke up in the middle of the night and had the answer.
然后你在半夜的时候醒了，然后知道怎么办了。
There it is. The brain frees up,
你的大脑就是这样工作的。
giving space for creativity.
给你更多的空间去创造。
Columbia University did a study of unstructured play in curriculum for children.
哥伦比亚大学呢，他们做一个研究，就是小孩的一个自由活动。
These are children from ages 4 to 13.
这些小孩呢，从4岁到14岁。
In the curriculum, they added 1 hour of unstructured play.
他在时间表上呢，加了一个就是自由活动时间。
Here are the results.
研究结果呢，
Students showed significant improvement in attentional skills
他们的注意力能力呢，有很大的进步。
and cognitive functioning after play.
他们这个协调能力呢，也有很大的进步。
They improved more than children in traditional academic classes.
比传统上的这个班级上的学生有更大的进步。
Play,
多玩，
goof off.
就是放松搞笑。
Don't fill your calendar so full.
不要安排太多的事情。
Give family time just to be together.
让我们家庭在一起做事情。
Now, that does not mean watching TV.
不代表着你要去看电视。
Good goofing off means time together to be creative.
我们在一起做一些创造的事情。
Jesus actually modeled this for us.
耶稣呢给我们做了一个榜样。
When you read the Gospels, there's a regular pattern of work.
你如果读圣经的话呢，耶稣也是有节奏的，有休息，有忙。
What is needed is a new priority of schedules.
你要就是重新调整你的时间表，把你的优先事项给你重新调整。
So look at everything on your calendar
把你的所有的事情看一下你的时间表上所有的事情。
and then ask what's important to this family.
你问一下呢，是你在你们家庭当中这个事情哪些是最重要的？
All right, here's your last assignment.
就是你最后的一个作业，
Have a conference this week as a family.
有个家庭会议。
Look closely at your schedules.
看你们的时间表，一定要小心看一看你的时间表。
Look at your family priorities
看你们家庭的这个优先事项。
and make choices.
做出选择。
What do we need for our?
对于你家庭来说，你们需要什么？
So those are 4 ideas, 4 things I think we can do to get back to a healthy place as families.
所以这是第4点呢，可以让我们把我们家庭弄得更健康。
Now we're going to allow some time for question and answers.
下面呢是我问问题的时间。
We've got a question already.
有人问问题。
Yeah, I think the question is here, is screen time healthy for our children?
他的问题呢，就是说我们小孩老是看那个平板啊、电脑啊什么的，这个时间，这个是不是对于家庭来说是不健康的？
And I would say that's not. I understand. I've got 3 grandchildren. That's exactly what we struggle with when they come to visit us. I think that that's not good goofy golf. A good goofy golf wants them to be creative and wants them to be imaginative, will play, not just work.
更有效的这个放松时间呢，可能让他们去创造，而不是只是看。
Yeah, I would recommend that we find some time together as a family. When we take some time, let's take time as family and do some things.
这一起作为家庭在一起做一件事情花一些时间做事情。
We've got children coming this weekend, and my son is a medical doctor, he's a urologist, and he never gets away from work. He struggles with that. So as they were coming, I said to him, his name is Zachary, I said, Zachary, do you remember where the baseball gloves are that we used to play ball? He said, oh, yeah, Dad, I love that. I said, bring them. Let's just pitch backyard. And he has a 6-year-old son now, so the 3 of us just going to be in the backyard pitching, and it's amazing the conversation that comes just with stuff like that.
他的儿子呢是个医生，平时也很忙，很少就是有玩什么的。然后他说他让他儿子把那个玩球的那个手套拿来，然后他们可以扔球玩什么的，就是作为家庭一起玩。有一个小孩6岁，他们可以一起玩。玩的时候呢，你就不知道有可能就会有一些惊喜的谈话。
Another thing that we like to do as a family is go to the zoo.
我们还要去动物。
And we can just walk for hours at the zoo, and the things you see, the people that you see, sometimes the people are more interesting than the animals.
我们去动物园呢，就是说看人看动物，有的时候看人看的还更多。
But anything you do together can be pretty important to that. Crafts, if you've got a family that likes to do crafts together.
家庭可以一起做手工。
I'm wondering, play chess or gardening two choice or no?
I think that would be very good, because you're having to be creative when you're doing chess.
Gardening?
Yeah, I think anything like that would be good.
一起参与。
Now, you may not have as much conversation around chess because you're trying to concentrate, but yeah, I think it would. You're also showing your children something that you have. This is a game that I find healthy and enjoyable.
How to encourage the kids to be involved in those great activities. Sometimes they come before like teenagers, they have their own thing. Of course, being like springtime is a great challenge nowadays. But if there are any tips or anything that you do well, they can share with us.
Yeah, I will tell you that when the grandson comes, the 6-year-old, he's got his iPad, he walks in with his iPad. He would live without iPad all the time. So what we do, we set boundaries. There are certain times you have your iPad. The rest of the time you can't, but you just have it sitting, we've got to do things. But we also make it clear that if you don't keep the boundaries restrict. So if you get to have your iPad for 30 minutes in the morning, tomorrow morning it's only going to be 15 minutes because you didn't keep the rules today. So some of that's just learning to create a different set of expectations. But I think this too, I think that we have to make sure that we give them something that's meaningful when we don't allow them to do a thing. So let's do something that we're going to do together. It could be as simple as we have a little flower garden out in our back. And when the grandchildren come, they love to get out of the flower garden. We'll pull weeds, we'll do things that they will enjoy. This 6-year-old, he can find a stick and play with that all afternoon. But he has to get away from his iPad.
a lot of times, parents, how do you encourage, you have to encourage, oh, go do something, so what?
Yeah, that's not a good way to do it. Don't say you go do something. Let's go do something together. And that's where we as parents, I think, are challenged. How can we learn to be a bit more creative? And I will tell you this, when my son was growing up, and I'm talking about playing ball, I can remember lying on the couch and tossing the ball the other end of the room to him while I lay on the couch. I would be so tired. We had a wiffle ball, it wasn't actually a baseball in the house. But we could do that in the house, and he still thought that we were playing. That's laying on the couch, trying to get some rest. But it challenges us. We have to be more creative as parents. And I think sometimes we blame the kids because they can't find anything to do. With the reality is, we couldn't find anything. Yeah, I think friends can be very good. One of the things we learned that we had to do is invite friends to our home. Then we had a little more control of what they were doing if they were in our home. But I'll tell you this, we've got a really close friend. Is it okay just to keep talking? I need to stop and let you. We have a really good friend that our youngest daughter grew up with. We used to live in Memphis 14 years ago. And they grew up together, they were little. And we used to have, every summer, we'd have a week of core camp, where they would both our little girls would get a friend and they would spend the week with us. That was when we lived in Memphis. And one of these little girls that was part of core camp is now at TPAC. She's went off to New York, became an actor, actress. Now she's coming to Nashville as part of TPAC. So we called her, come to dinner. And she said this, can we have homemade ice cream like we used to have at core camp? Now here's a child that's a grown adult now that remembers being, like sixth grade, having homemade ice cream. That's still a good memory for her. So I think that if we can have the children in our home, we can create the kinds of environments where it's a little bit different than just sending to somebody else's home. I can tell you, I'm a little concerned. A lot of these children go to these homes that are not supervised at home. That's
Regarding kids, nowadays, the whole, I think the whole smartphone, children, when our kids go to play it, what do? They still play video games. That's their play. So I'm not quite sure it's a battle that's winnable, but how we adapt to the reality that they'll spend most of the time online.
Now, if they're playing video games together and they're interacting together, I'm not as bothered by that. I think that can be a healthy thing. It's when they go and they do their own thing separately. Listen, I was in a restaurant recently. Two men walked in, two young adult men, for lunch. I'm guessing that these two men were co-workers. They probably left office together. They came, they sat down. They were just right across from here to where you go. Just right that close. Yeah. They sat there the whole meal and never once spoke. They took their phones out. They were on their phones. They ate while they were on their phones and nothing left. No. I guess they had lunch together. I guess that's what they call it, lunch. So it's not just the children. It's the whole culture that we have to do that to. So again, that's where we have to create boundaries. Healthy boundaries will help set the pace for what's okay. And then we got to introduce them to new and different activities. What would be meaningful, helpful to them? And we teach them some things that are meaningful to us.
Imagine a kid at a school, then everyone take out their phone. That's what they do. So what they will turn out to do is they will look at their phone. So that's the rule.
Well, I can't control what they do at school. I can only control what they do in my home. And I think that's one of the things we've got to fight with. We've got to be, in some ways, countercultural in the way that we choose to have our family time and our family life together. I'll give you another example of that. I mentioned my daughter, Charlotte. She's 24 now. She was, we had recently hosted another one of her friends to sort of grow with us. And later on, she said, Dad, my friend Shelby loves being with your mom. And I said, well, number one, I'm glad that Shelby loves being with us. I'm glad that you love her being with us. And she said, you'd be surprised at how few of my friends have parents that even like each other. And so for this other young adult woman to come back home, because there's an environment there that's loving, that's caring, that has conversation. By the way, my 24-year-old invited, she works at HCA, she invited me to lunch one day with her older sister and one of her friends. So there's 3 young adult women and me at this table at HCA. Oh, yeah. People were saying, he must be sharper than he looks. But we're having, so I pulled out the 20 questions, the do you know scale. And I said, let's just, while we're having lunch, let me just ask you some of these questions. Well, they got so involved with that my older daughter said, Dad, I've got to go to work. I can't do any more of these. Just do one more. And he said, no, give us 2 more. Now, the next week, that other child that was with us, she told me that her grandmother had been in town. And she said, I went through those questions with my grandmother because there was a lot about my family that I didn't know. So all of a sudden now we had something to talk about around lunch that they got involved with. But we have to be creative. You just can't sit and say, y'all talk. Our daughter Caroline is the one that you asked her, how was your day? Good. Charlotte, the youngest one, is the one, she's the expert so far. So when we were growing up, we had to think around the table. Everybody had to share one thing about their day. So we were around. If you get to Caroline, she'd say, tell them, Charlotte. She'd say, oh, Caroline had the best thing. No, Caroline, you tell us about your day. That's still true. Still true. Yeah.
Regarding the use of smartphone, actually one of my friends told me the solution is don't give the children the smartphone, rather than give children the old phone. Just the phone call.
So they get the flip phone and you get the smartphone.
Yeah.
Like that.
But this is okay because my wife said, for example, she said, then children will think that they are outline of kids.
Well, a couple of things I would say. One is, I think the smartphone, the internet is with us. So we can't just, we can't become ignoring that's kind of part of it. I think what we have to do is learn to find a way to manage it. So as an example, they're only going to get the apps that I approve. There are some things you can do, some things you can't do. They're going to be limited in terms of times and places they can use that. I do want my children to have, even back to the day, I need them to have phones. I need to be able to reach them when they need to reach them. But what they do on that phone now is something that we've got to have to manage that a little better. How many of you didn't know? I don't see hands, but how many of you know what apps your children have on? When's the last time you looked to see the kind of stuff they're downloading? It could be still.
Well, just one reason why anytime you start out that your children actually way better than you on the technology on the app, so you cannot actually know because they're coming in, right? So there's sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And I think again here is what we're trying to do is create a sense of trust in the family. And they're going to violate your trust. Part of the task of every child is to provide a competent parents. And part of the task also is to differentiate the family origin. So there's always going to be that kind of tension that you're struggling with. But you also want to create a sense of trust that we're trusting you with this, honor our trust. And we will give you more trust as you honor what we with you.
I've heard a principle, there's some research that you plan the time goal for your kids and they do not have to do something you don't want them to do, which is a little kind of contradictory to what you are saying. Okay, you want the kids at least 3 times or sometimes you got too much activity on their calendar, right? So there's a balance there, and also they are saying put the good stuff around their schedule. So the good stuff could be the cooking time with you, so it's more like involvement from there.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's exactly what I think I'm saying. I would also say too that Things like extracurricular activities can be very, very healthy if they don't become too many. I've known some families that the child went to this activity, that activity, that activity, they had no time for anything else. And so one of the things we did, we said you can choose one activity every semester. So it may be basketball. My oldest daughter is an attorney in Brooklyn, New York. She's 34 years old, and she still plays. She played high school basketball, and she still plays in a co-educational league in Brooklyn at 34 years old. So that became meaningful for her as an activity, but we wanted to make sure they didn't have too many activities. So it's hard to do dance and basketball and whatever. But finding some extracurricular is important. But I also think that downtime, the moving time, can be something that we do together. Are there online resources for families to look at and say, oh, these are good ideas? I'm sure there are. I don't know what they are, but I would say, look, I would challenge y'all to go try to find some things. Everything is online. So what are the things? Exactly. Yes, that's what I recommend. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're talking about the young people know more about all this technology than we do. Our 24-year-old, but she lives here in town. She lives actually in Fort Myers. She comes over to us and she said, I've become my parents' IT director. Every time I come home, I have to fix something or tell them something or do something with the internet stuff. On that. Well, I'll be my dry fever. So she works for free. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
I have to, since we have 4 kids, my older one is turned to a teenager, and I still have 2 younger ones. They fight constantly. My teenager is crazy. Make me crazy. Make my family crazy. We're like crazy family every day. Like, oh, I don't even have normal conversation. How you handle it?
Well, first of all, teenagers are crazy. There's a whole book, Dan Siegel is the psychiatrist that's written a whole book on teenage psychiatry, and the title of his book is Brainstorm. And there's a whole storm of chemical changes that are going on. You've got to realize that a lot of the neurons that aren't being used are being sloughed off during that particular time. There's real challenges between you as a family and the peer group and trying to figure out who can be the most influence in their lives. There's a lot of pressure on these kids. Now, here's the thing about it too, the diagnostic and statistical manual for mental illness, the things that we use to diagnose it, typically doesn't begin until about the age of 20. Because normal, healthy teenager is schizophrenic. So it is crazy making for you. And some things like a labile mood swing. So for most of us, if you're having labile mood swings, that would indicate that there's something really wrong. For a teenager, that's more like this breakfast and lunch. That's what they go through all the time. They're just constantly going from one thing to the other. And you got to realize too that even though it feels like he's coming at you with a lot of anger and resentment and whatever, that's what he's feeling on this side. There's a brainstorm going on. So my suggestion is love him as best you can. Create some boundaries for him. I recommend reading that book too. Like, by the way, Kevin Lehman has really chapters in there. One about how you make money with him. So here's having a teenage by Friday. Now that book, don't think it's by Friday. But there, yeah, he's in a pickle. I will tell you this too, with 3 girls and 1 boy for us, we used to think if we could just get to the 9th grade, I mean, from 6th grade to 9th grade, these little girls just went crazy. But then after 9th grade, it's what that became normal. One time I said to my son, this guy's bright, he went over to the urologist, he's the chief of surgery at this hospital, he's on the hospital board, he's on surgery, bright kid. And I told him one time, I said, Zachary, I want to tell you how grateful I am as your dad is that you never gave us a day of trouble. He said, well, Dad, you don't know about the time. And I said, don't tell me. Don't want to hear it? So it doesn't matter how good or compliant or sweet they are, they're going through struggles, and some of that you don't know. I don't know. Here's, now you gotta remember this too, the prefrontal lobe, the part of the brain that actually is your judgment center, that doesn't even fully form until the child is 26. So when you say to a teenager, son, what were you thinking? He literally is not thinking. That part of the brain is not even there, it's just not formed yet. So that's not unusual. And one of the things we think about with developmental psychology is what would be developmentally appropriate for the child. So for the teenager, developmentally appropriate is doing some stupid things. So what you hope for is they survive. If you can survive until they're 26, all of a sudden they become like human people. They sort of get it together. Now, you also have the puer eternus, that's the Latin phrase for the eternal child. Some of these children just don't even grow up. And then, yeah. The prefrontal lobe. Yeah, that part of the brain that is your judgment system.
Okay, and that's critical. So, do you think it's a reasonable, conclusion that, when is younger than 26 and do not be ready yet for marriage?
Well,
Not every single, like,
yeah,
I mean, statistically.
I think what I would say is you can have 30-year-olds who are not ready for marriage. The couple things that you're going to need would be a secure attachment. If this person is secure within themselves, they're not looking for someone to kind of fulfill who they are. They need to have a secure attachment. They need to have a secure social support system. So having family or others around, other adults in their lives that they can look to for guidance and help, that those would be pretty critical. And the last thing to say is they need to have a pretty strong spiritual base. Because of who they are in Jesus Christ. Because the crises, the thing that we can't predict about marital success is how people will have a crisis. So the loss of a child, as an example, or a major illness, financial loss, or loss of job, will be devastating. And so you need to have some kind of spiritual base because you need to focus on life that goes to pieces. But I would tell you this, I'm not too concerned about how early the child marries. I am concerned that during those first 2 years, the marital diet, what that would do by that is the two have to become one, and that is really separates from the organization. What we're seeing now is a lot of couples are divorcing now after 40 years of marriage, 35 years of marriage. What we're seeing is that the marital diet never formed. They went from being a couple to being a family, they raised children, now they're couples again, and they don't share anything in common. They never became one. So that's what's critical. So I don't know that age or the prefrontal lobe is important as having enough people around there that can give them guidance they don't know.
I think, some farm or cities like movies. So they think to go to theater to watching a movie to put the family time. What's the recommendation?
A family movie, I'm not a big fan of TV, but a movie can be healthy for a family if, when it's over, we talk about what we just saw. And that we process what were the messages here, what do you think about what you saw, is that good, is that bad? So I think it will be okay if we use it intentionally as a family event. But just have the TV on and a movie going and, it's Friday night, put some popcorn, what's on, who knows what's on. Well, I think we need to be a little more intentional about what we're going to watch. And that's the other thing I don't like about when I send my children to other people's homes. We used to have a pretty clear rule about PG-13 and R-rated movies, that kind of stuff, and there were things we would let our kids see. And we learned, well, they just watched it at Jody's house last week. You're not allowed to see that. Well, the father said it's okay. So, So we decided, let our house be a place to come, and we'll choose. How we do it all the time, if I'm like running over
Well,
time.
we still have that. Well, I think the answer covered. I just said, when we guys were talking about how we can, we live with the spirit, and I said, so supporting that. And then said, as parents, right, we're still at home, that the parents to be, but it's just like, social network, so that's so, what you, my understanding is that when you fulfill your house, and then you will be better for your kids. So you not only focus on the kids, more focus on yourself, using yourself as a house, which is think about what you.
Absolutely. Yeah, let me say this too. The way the child is going to get a secure attachment, they're going to see it first. They're going to grow up in that building. So they have to have some type of a secure home environment. W.D. Winnicott was one of the very earliest child psychologists back in the day with this whole stuff as a brand new field. Winnicott used to say, if you're trying to be a good parent, forget that, because there's no such thing as good parents. Every parent is going to make mistakes. Every parent is going to say the wrong thing. Every parent is going to be impatient. So get over trying to be a good parent. He said, what you want to be is the good enough parent. And the good enough parent has two things. It provides a home where there is stability and there's love. If your child will grow up where there's stability and love, and don't figure it out. But that becomes a more secure attachment. That's where the child is going. The other thing I'd say is, if you want a child to have a secure attachment, make sure that they have lots of affirmation. So you want to, now, you're not just trying to say good things, say good things. You're trying to actually point out what is, I think the strength today's comparison that you see is strength is a really good resource to have. We're trying to find what is it that we can actually affirm in the child. Because we will always find things that we can criticize. My uncle used to say, don't ever say you did your best, you can always do better. I sort of looked, I thought that was, I told that to my wife when we were early there, she said, don't ever say that again, that's a horrible thing to say. But the idea is, yeah, we can always do better, but you want to find things that where people do well and affirm that. Because then they'll do their task motivation is good and all this. So I think that's part of it. We need to make sure that children grow up in a home where they feel stable, secure, loved, and they feel worthy of application. And they seek parents. That's why I'm so sad when my daughter said, they don't see parents. That's sad. No, I can tell you just from where I work every day doing counseling at Brentwood Baptist Church, there are plenty of people who are staying together. You know, the loss of fondness and a lot of people stay together for a lot of other reasons.
Hey, how's school? You gonna be? How is school? Hey, how's the house? Oh, how's the friend? So we start to start. They don't want to hear that. They want to say, okay, we want. They want to have to say, oh, they want to do it. Oh, and this is that. So it's on here. Both of them say that. They enjoy. They enjoy.
Yeah, and I think we've got to create a whole new environment. We're struggling because we've allowed kind of this, that's why I say this is kind of a reset. We didn't do a lot of these things before, and now because the pandemic runs, boy, the families are dysfunctional. Now we're all together, we're in this home, we're quarantined together, and we don't even like each other, what do we do? So now we gotta find a way to reset, let's go back. Now, I will tell you this, it's okay to be a lazy parent, I'm good with that, but don't give the responsibility to clubs and coaches and others to raise your child. It's okay to be involved in those activities. I think the more positive adult you can put in a child's life, the better. Sometimes they will listen to the coach before they listen to the parents. Or they'll listen to, my youngest daughter was into Irish dance. She did that for years, so just couldn't afford it anymore. But her Irish dance teacher was probably as influential as we were, early forms of theater. So, yeah, it's okay to have some time away, but I need some time too. You gotta have, I would say this to go back to what you're talking about being what we provide for our children. You gotta have capacity, emotional capacity to give your children emotional capacity. If I'm always just emotionally drained, I wouldn't be able to do that. So your own self-care is very important. Be sure you take care of yourself.
Yeah, I think it's generalized, that this is also what we don't have is enough luck. So we have a way so there's a disconnect of what we feel are could have done so much better, given all those activities. While the reality of taking so I mean you have general advice for this.
Yeah, I would say that I really can't speak to your experience because it's so different than anything I've experienced. I did come from Alabama, I guess that's like it. But I would say this too, go back to that do you know scale, we talked about where we came from, what we did, how we overcome. I think your story, because your children are living a very different experience. They're not going to share that with you. So to give them a sense of who we are, where did we come from? How did we get to this place where we became, and again, as you said, highly academically trained? Your successes are pretty powerful. To be able to come from China to here, you leave family behind. I would say this too. The other benefit, I think those who have lived here for multiple generations, we have family that has a sense of stability. There's a story here that goes deep into the very soil we walk on. My wife has a family farm in Kentucky, and that farm has been farmed for like several generations. Now, grandma, who's 87, says, who wants to farm? I'm about farming. So Bubba still farms. He's the cousin that's still on that farm. I don't know. But, you know, there's kinds of connections that we have that you all don't have. And I think that taking the time to make sure that you educate your children what it's like to be a first generation immigrant, what it's like to have grown up in China. Are you from China? Yeah. Are y'all all from China? When I was in Memphis, we had a pretty large Laotian congregation. And I knew more about Laos than I did. So I think you have an opportunity to really teach them about who they are. Now, the challenge they have too is they're always going to be minorities. Back to trouble. But I think that I was making that to say, I'm sorry, but I think that the church can also become an extended family. We're in this together. Yeah. And that can be something you can offer people who are interested in spiritual things, but they might be interested in. And we know that. Yeah. Two questions.
Couple of one question is, probably because of the past difference. For American families, they are still providing each other, but maybe in the end of the day, they already finished their relationship. But for the Chinese family, they may take some years of trouble to feel, they didn't separate. So I'm wondering, do you have some experience or advice how to control yourself to not follow home, especially home?
I'm not exactly sure. Controlling myself.
If I may,
Yeah.
some, in Western world, people, or in current days, people are, still working or end up the relationship with very quickly, but in some days or in our generation, that people are following with each other for a long, long time, they still stick to each other and suffer, suffer. And stay with each other. So, that's your question, right?
Basically, I think it's Chinese family and American family different. I have thought it's the house different. Yeah, because
We thought that,
Yeah.
Asian culture marriage has more quantity. American marriage has more quality.
Yeah, I think what I was saying, though, there are some things that not any couple can do to nurture fondness and appreciation for each other. But it's something that we have to constantly remind ourselves of. And go back to criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. We have to find ourselves in that. Where do I, in my relationship with my spouse, where do I find myself doing that at this time? One time Denise even said to me, she said, "Ken, are you really honest how critical you are?" She said, "Yeah, you've been just very critical for a while." And once she said that, I intentionally tried to become aware. And I even told her, "Tell me when I'm doing that." So I and I was critical. And so I had to change. So part of it is becoming aware of your own self and then making some intentional decisions about being nurturing fondness. Now, give an example of that. You can, there's some simple things you can do. One thing is try to make sure every day you tell your spouse one thing about it that you appreciate. Every day, come up, not the same thing every day, but you come up with a different thing every day that I appreciate about you and say it out loud. And over time, we just little habits like that, we begin to have a little bit different attitude about that person. I do think that feelings are going to follow behaviors. So if I don't feel attracted to you right now, I've got to change my behavior so that I'm doing things that I recognize about you that I like. Because there are a lot of things about you that I don't like. So if you live with anybody very long, there's things about that you don't like. So you just got to learn to find things that you like and focus on that. Move your feelings to change. But again, it's going to be very intentional. These are things we're going to have to do to make ourselves be different together. By the way, those of you who are newly married or not married yet, talk about quality versus quantity. The average American family right now is married by 7 years. So typically it fails in the first 2. So you got to realize that I'm getting married 45. I'm busting the scale on the wrong end. So a lot of families, there may be some lot of quality there. American families become too divided in this field. The relationship suffers. No, I've worked with them now. Again, Brentwood is a pretty affluent place. You mentioned that before. This is an affluent place. I've known people who said, "I hate my work. It's killing me. But I've got a home here. We've got a vacation home up in Colorado, wherever. I've got my family's all in private schools, and they expect that 3 day baby to be there. I have to have a job. And it's changed. And that's, to me, that's a change. There's some kind of quality that the family is missing out when that's unlikely to be there. Or you got the guy who simply lives for retirement. That's a shame. I'm already 70. I'm at retirement age, and I don't want to retire. Well, bless you. Because we went on a cruise last week. We just got back on the cruise last week. We were 8 days on a boat. I was so bored by the time that was over. I thought I could never retire. I mean, this is like 8 days down this thing. What would I do about that? So what you got to do is find something that gives you pleasure and passion, and invest in that. Invest in your family. And we were talking about that when we were going around the circle with our family. Everybody had shared one thing. This was a day when I was still preaching every Sunday. And they said, Dad, how was your day? And I said, well, I had a struggle there. I didn't trying to find a sermon. I don't know how to preach. And my little Charlotte, she's got 4 years old, she said, how hard did that be? Well, I didn't know what to say, though. It was a little hard to know what to say. She said, just talk about God. Well, I could do that, but I don't know what to say about God. And she said, as a 4-year-old, tell him that Jesus loved him, Jesus died for them, and Jesus rose again. And that became my sermon. I actually preached it. We called Charlotte. Thank y'all. Let's pray for us as we are closing the ribbon of prayer. God, thank you for family. Thank you for placing us in a family where we can be nurtured, and you know exactly the challenge family because you live in a challenging family. And I pray that you would guide us as we seek to be right now in this place, resetting to a healthier place, and help us make those decisions that we need, that you know, and you would guide us in all this decisions. So, God, every step we'll follow as best we can. Remind us of today. In Jesus' name. Amen. Tell Pastor Wayne I did this.
We appreciate your time with us and a great witness of the Christian-based marriage and also, great talk tonight. Thank you for being with us. And well, I'm going to put out an announcement in Chinese if you don't mind. 这个是刚刚庆君姐妹给我的一个 poster， 说是明天星期六的1点到4点，在Edwin Warner Park Shelter No. 3，有华人协会的端午节庆祝，有简单的茶点、水果、粽子，有游戏比赛、舞蹈、歌唱、武术、绘画，名额有限，先到先得。好，大家请预留时间参加，如果你有什么的，有时间的话哈，在今天晚上最后大家离开之前，神祝福我们的脚步。最后一个 quiz， 今天晚上past 10 ，how many assignments do we have? Oh, everybody did great. Thank you again for your time, for being with us. We hope that you'll be with us very soon. Thank you very much. 我先祝福大家离开的脚步。
那个